complex at Lakeland, Florida, coming to you live from the 2014 Sun and Fun Fly-In. For over 16 years, we have been bringing aviation safety seminars and message to you via seminars, workshops, and videos using our aviation safety team representatives, which means our production crew is made up almost entirely of volunteers, giving their time to support aviation safety. After today's presentation, please take the time. We have some camera crew out there, our stage people, our floor managers. Tell them thank you. Our next presenter is founder and medical director for the Southern Aeromedical Institute and instructor for Black Sky Training. His research has led to the successful integration of high-altitude chamber technology. Dr. Paul Bouza is a board-certified neurologist specializing in advanced diving medicine and aerospace physiology. Let's give him a big round of applause. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'm passionate about this topic, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and kind of guide us through fundamentals of altitude and hypoxia and make it relevant to general commercial aviation. And I'm hoping that you get something meaningful out of this that could benefit this afternoon's flight on your own personal aircraft. I'm assuming you flew in on your aircraft, so maybe there can be something today that can make a meaningful difference. We're going to talk about hypoxia, but it's a lot more than just hypoxia. It's a spectrum of issues that can affect the general aviator, commercial aviator. So let's go over one of the fundamental issues that we first learn in altitude physiology, which is the time of useful consciousness. Now, to do that, I developed a diving hypobaric chamber. This chamber, as you can see, has outer doors. Let's see, where's my little, there he is. So when we're diving, the inner doors are closed and we go under high pressure. And when we're flying, we close the outer doors, apply a vacuum system, and we recreate altitude effects. This program has been active now since 1999. We've conducted over 40,000 patient dives, issues related to scuba diving bends, and in 2001 we launched our high altitude physiology program. So I'm going to share a lot of information with you today about a lot of things that we've learned along the way. In 1999, there was a Payne Stewart event, and it really brought to light what happens in the event of a cabin depressurization. And the United States infrastructure for high altitude physiology training has been excellent and is a world leader. The FAA has their high altitude chamber in the Oklahoma City, and private and commercial aviators can access the excellent training that's always been provided to the military for high altitude physiology. Our program is located in Melbourne, and in August of 2005, long after the Payne Stewart event, was a very significant event involving a Boeing 737 in Europe. It took off, failed to pressurize, the crew didn't identify it, became incapacitated, and over 121 people died on that flight, crashing in Greece. Now, I can tell you if that accident happened here in the United States, that would be common knowledge. But in Europe, it did. It happened in Europe. And that changed how I wanted to approach high-altitude hypoxia training. So what I did was, in the standard fashion, and here he is, the standard fashion is for all of us to jump in this chamber, in large groups. We all put our little masks on. We fly to 25,000 feet of altitude, low pressure. We come off the masks, And time of useful consciousness at 25,000 feet is approximately 3 to 5 minutes. So you start your exercises, you start doing simple tasks, and within 3 minutes, you can't do it anymore. You put your mask on, you recover nicely, and at that point, it teaches a very, very humble message that you don't have much time if we lose cabin pressurization. You lose cabin pressurization, we don't have enough time. If you can't do a simple task, how on earth are you going to fly your aircraft? That's the standard in training. What I wanted to do in '06, after the Helios accident, was take the same chamber, but integrate flight sims, because pilots love to fly. And you give a pilot a sim, the first thing they want to do is take off, right? And I also built an air traffic control station immediately outside the chamber. And what we do is we fly in the chamber true altitude with the sim with air traffic communications. I'm going to show you some really interesting videos today of some of our, shall I say, more dramatic demonstrations of hypoxia. The good news is we can record the pilot's flight video. So here's the pilot flying. He knows his true altitude. He sees his performance, and we can actually see a global view of the chamber. We've flown over 2,000 pilots this way now since 2006. And as a matter of fact, we're way over 2,000. The program is growing. We're involved with commercial, university programs, cadet programs, corporate jet departments. So there's a whole broad spectrum of pilots that we've been training. And what they all love in the end, of course, is their video. It's a YouTube world. Everyone loves to watch themselves on video, right? So why don't we take advantage of that? And the pilots can watch themselves fly and at the same time watch their performance. So let's do some fundamental work. We can get through this pretty quick in about 5 minutes. Learning the TUC table is like in elementary school, we were forced to memorize our multiplication tables. And so we should memorize our TUC tables by heart. And the classic, and we'll just go through a couple of these individually, but we're going to start at sea level. We're going to talk about 5,000 feet. And I know that some of you don't fly to altitudes above 10. So we'll talk about some issues that are relevant below 10. We'll work our way up to, of course, cruise altitude, and we'll go ahead and study the TUCs. What is TUC, time of useful consciousness? What is it? What's the definition of it? The definition would be a significant neurocognitive impairment where you no longer can perform your flight duties. Now that's kind of a, sometimes that's kind of a fine line. You can be talking to people, they seem okay, but they're out of control. I'm going to show you some videos on that. But the basic concept of time of useful consciousness is neurocognitive impairment at some point which compromises your ability to fly the aircraft, to solve a situation, to respond to an ACAS alert. So that's kind of a rough kind of approximation. Now, this table is an approximation. This table was designed in controlled studies where pilots were taken to different altitudes on their masks, and when they removed the masks, they timed their performance in some type of test, and they calculated roughly the time that you could do that. But pilots don't take off on masks, do they? Pilots ascend, and they're at immediate ambient pressure. So it's an approximation. It's not a hard science. What this means is if you explosively decompress an aircraft at 25,000 feet, that doesn't mean you can get up and go to the bathroom and be back to your seat within 3 minutes in time for your TUC, right? So in other words, some people can really feel the effects sooner. Some people seem to go an extra minute or two. So let's go over the fundamentals of our time of useful consciousness table. And here we are at sea level. We're only 100 feet above sea level, and we're breathing the richest amount of oxygen that we can on the planet, right? So if 1 atmosphere of pressure at sea level is 760 millimeters mercury, 21% of that is oxygen, about 159, 160 millimeters of oxygen is what we're breathing right now in this room. We like that. That's a nice, rich supply of oxygen. As soon as we ascend, that amount of oxygen starts to decrease. And it's in a spectrum. So let's go to 5,000 feet. Let's talk about 5,000 feet. A lot of people say, well, I don't have to worry about any issues related to hypoxia because I don't fly high enough, and I never go above 10,000 feet. Well, at 5,000 feet, at night, for more than 30 minutes, you're about to lose about 10 to 15% of your color vision. The most sensitive tissue in the body related to lower pressures of oxygen is first and foremost the retina. The retina demands constant sources of fuel to be able to manage vision and color. So the first thing that goes is color vision. So in the chamber, I started doing night flights. And here's what it kind of looks like. This is a commercial captain who's flying my sim in the chamber. And we're on the fly out. And you see your colors on the instrumentations here. What's nice about this particular night flight, is that I can demonstrate to the pilots that really profound loss of color. What he had, and each person is different. Some people seem not to be as affected as others. So each person is different. So at 5,000 feet, at night, for more than 30 minutes, expect a little bit of desaturation in terms of your color vision, which can easily be corrected with supplemental oxygen. So hypoxia actually can begin at 5,000 feet. Let's work our way up the table. Let's go to 8,000 feet. Why do we limit commercial aircraft today for passenger use to 8,000 feet? Did we pick that number out of a hat? Why is it that commercial cabin altitudes are not allowed to exceed 8,000 feet? Arbitrary? It's not. The reason is because at 8,000 feet, you are reaching the upper limit of what we consider to be normal respiratory physiology tolerance. In other words, your oxygen levels now are down to approximately 92% saturation. In other words, we're in this room right now, we're breathing 159 millimeters. We take a saturation. Many private aviators like to bring their little pulse oxes with them, and that's a good idea. So what are we at sea level most of the time? 98, 99, 97. We're happy there. The brain's happy there. I can tell you that because I'm a neurologist. The brain is happy at 97, 98% oxygen saturation. The brain has to have oxygen at all times until there's a certain limit, and then the brain starts to slow down. Sorry about that. So what's the lower limit? If if you're in the hospital and I come up and I put a pulse ox on you, and I know that there's a range of saturation, and that lower range is 92%. Anything below 92% is considered to be abnormal. So if you get down into the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, you're critically low on oxygen. In other words, there's something wrong, and we will respond to that. So I'm going to show you some really interesting data I've collected in a research project over the past 5 years. The point is that at 8,000 feet, commercial maximum allowed cabin altitude of 8,000 feet, the average saturation is 92%. In other words, the industry was designed around our limitations to the planet in a cost-effective way to keep the weight down in the aircraft, but to make a one-ATA aircraft is very, very expensive. So what was the compromise? 8,000 feet. But I'm here to tell you today that even prolonged exposure to 8,000 feet is not benign. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's work our way up the chart. Here we go. Now we're up to 14,000. We do have general aviators flying at 14,000. We even have general aviators flying unpressurized aircraft up to 25,000 feet. Does not the Cirrus 22 Turbo have a max ceiling of 25,000 feet, and it's unpressurized? So you can start to appreciate how important our need for proper oxygen delivery is in such an environment. Okay, so now let's say we go to 14,000. You say, well, that's not that high. This is Mauna Kea in Hawaii. I threw this in at the last minute because next month I'm off to the Big Island for 2 weeks. My daughter's getting married. We're having a destination wedding there. And my son, the first thing my son said, who's going to meet us there from Seattle, he said, let's go to the observatory. He has a degree in physics, by the way, so astronomy is his thing. And let's go to the observatory on top of the mountain. We're not far from here. So this is 14,000 feet. Now, if you go to the website, the first thing they tell you is the effects of altitude, don't they? You drive up this mountain, you start getting high mountain effects. Well, the same thing can happen to pilots if they go to these altitudes, and we're talking 14,000 feet. If you take off from sea level and climb and fly to Mauna Kea here, 14,000 feet, what is the time of useful consciousness? That's only about 60 to 70 minutes. That's not a long time, is it? And there's been general aviation accidents because of pilots who not accustomed to flying at these altitudes, but had to go to higher altitudes because of weather or because of terrain. And the, shall we say, the improper use or awareness of their oxygen systems failed them. And there's been hypoxic events because of it. Now, let's keep on going. Now we're going to jump all the way up to 25,000. And this is one of, excuse me, this is one of the most fundamental numbers of the multiplication table that we memorize. And where'd my little buddy go? I seem to have lost him. But at 25,000 feet, time of useful consciousness is now down to 3 to 5 minutes. Look how dramatically this falls off. And for those of you who fly pressurized aircraft, this is very relevant for you. Now all we have to do is level off at cruise altitude of 40,000. If we have an explosive deco there, we are down to 10 to 15 seconds. So these are the fundamentals of the very thin availability of oxygen in terms of the spectrum of in our ascent. This table is an approximation, and it teaches us a humble message. When there's a cabin depressurization at high altitude, the very first instinctive thing that we must do is donor masks. We don't have time to talk about it. We don't have time to look it up on a checklist. We don't have time to call somebody. The very first order of business is donor masks. Second order of business, descend the aircraft. And what's the third order? Declare your emergency. Now that would be in a pressurized cabin scenario. So what is, let's go back, what is hypoxia? Now I can sit here and give you a lengthy lecture on all the signs and symptoms and all those things, but here, if you really want to know what hypoxia is, let's watch this pilot who's getting pretty hypoxic.
I saw you descending and climbing erratically. You feel alright? No, nothing in hand. Switch to O2. Connection to 513. Switch to 100% oxygen. Connect to 244 before you hit the ground. Switch to oxygen.
That's hypoxia. Hypoxia is human. It's a human experience. Signs and symptoms, yes, we're going to talk about it. But here he was euphoric. And look how happy he was, and he wasn't responding appropriately. That's hypoxia. And as we go through more, I'll show you some more videos. Now, you can be real happy and euphoric, or you could be real quiet and fixated, and you don't want to talk to anybody. We take different forms of our personality into the hypoxia as we approach incapacitation. Here's another example. Let's watch this.
City via the PATIS 1 arrival on Victor 1524. Maintain your current altitude until 2306 Zulu.
103, can you repeat that?
So,
clear to Salt Lake City, PATIS 1 arrival via Victor 1524. Maintain your current altitude until 2306 Zulu.
Continue to, can you 150, and can you report the rest of that, please?
DCA 103, you feeling any symptoms?
Yes, showing lightheaded.
Alright, if you had felt this way in the aircraft, what would you do?
I'd don my mask.
Alright, go ahead, DCA 103.
Alright, 103, donning the mask.
DCA 101, what's your current altitude, sir?
Altitude's 16,000.
And where are you going?
I'm heading 150, 101.
DCA 101, symptoms.
I'm getting a little dizzy, 101.
Alright, DCA 101, if you noticed your first officer just put on his mask, what would you do as the captain?
Are you talking to 101?
That's right, 101.
I would report 101.
Alright, DCA 101, go ahead and don your oxygen mask for me, sir.
101?
Yep, oxygen mask 101.
Alright, 101, mask?
Yes, sir. 102, how you feeling? Pretty loopy. DCA 102, can I get a right turn to heading 180, sir? Right turn to 180.
that's hypoxia. Did he not have normal speech? Does he not look like he's in control of the aircraft, yet his aircraft is out of control? Each person has a different way of manifesting their hypoxia. Sometimes it's very dramatic, there's lots of symptoms and sensations, they're very verbal about it. Other times they just don't really notice it much, right up to the point where they lose control of their aircraft. So hypoxia can sneak up on you. Now, my work has led to looking at the entire spectrum of hypoxia. And so we just talked about, if I can find my little buddy here, I look at the whole spectrum, which is a function of altitude and time. And as you can see, the first line is the rapid explosive model, where it's pretty obvious for us to identify, and the first thing we need to do is put our mask on. That would be like within seconds, an explosive decompression, right? Or it could be a rapid one, you know, where the cabin is depressurizing over a minute or two. It's a pretty dramatic event. It's hard to miss. What I have found is that when it's about 10 minutes, I define that as being slow onset hypoxia. And the reason I've done that is because when pilots have an explosive deco, situational awareness is beautifully preserved. They know what they need to do. But in the slower model, while they're busy flying, they'll forget what they need to do. The sensations are more subtle, and because they're task-oriented and they're actually involved, they minimize the signs and symptoms of hypoxia, and there's a tremendous capacity for fixation. And that's been my message to the commercial side on slow onset hypoxia. Over here is very slow. And for general aviators who fly, let's say, between 8 and 15,000 feet, and they hold there for an hour, because remember, time of useful consciousness at 14,000 feet, remember, 60 to 70 minutes. So if you're up there for an hour, your hypoxia will come on so slowly, over an hour, you won't even recognize it. Yet, you're thinking you're in control of the aircraft. So this is really important to know. This is, in my view, one of the dangerous traps in general aviation for unpressurized aircraft above 8,000 feet. And now I'm starting to look at physiological fatigue as a function of just cabin altitudes. I just told you that our upper limit within normal range is 8,000 feet, but I have a feeling on long-haul flights that there is an effect on physiological fatigue in addition to jet lag, in addition to what they call transmeridian desynchronization, jet lag, where the internal circadian rhythm clock is disrupted. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So what I decided to do was take our standard TUC table, which we've already memorized now, right? So good job. But I'd like to ask you to now expand your concept of TUC tables, and as a function of ascent rates. And so 100 consecutive pilots flown from a cabin altitude of 5,000 feet, where the cabin altitude was rising at 1,500 feet per minute, slow onset hypoxia. Time of useful consciousness came out to be 9.2 minutes. I would like you to add to your TUC table the concept of different ascent rates and what the TUC would be. And so on an ascent rate of 1,500 feet a minute, the TUC turned out to be 9.2. I've been measuring continuous pulse oxes. Normally when you wear your little pulse ox, you look at it, it gives you a reading, and you say, oh, my sats are 98. I'm in good shape, and my heart is beating at 70 beats a minute because I'm a cool customer, and I'm not stressed out. So what I have is a watch that wears like a pulse, and it collects it every 1 second into a chip, which of course we download into a computer, and I can generate a profile. So here you see the oxygen is near 100% sat, 99, but look, as we start to climb to higher altitudes, look how low it goes. What I have found is in that model where the TUC at 9.2 minutes, they have 3 sensations and they're feeling behind the aircraft, they're not in front of it, they're a little impaired, a profound saturation of 63% average, 63%. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that. It's a huge physiological mismatch. You think you're okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to learn about this. You think you're okay, and your sats are at 60%. You're about to pass out, and you don't know it. So I'm here to tell you today that you may think you're in control and that your symptoms of hypoxia are mild, but with a saturation of 60%, you're ready to say goodnight. And I'm going to show you some videos to prove that. But let's go ahead and justify why we're doing all this, why you've taken the time to even come out and see me today. If you review the fatal accidents of hypoxia, cabin depressurization, over the last 15 years, you will not find in the commercial industry a fatality associated with explosive decompressions. If you do, please email me. I would love to know about it. There's been some military events, of course, but I'm talking commercial. Explosive decompressions and rapid decompressions happen all the time in the industry. But there's no fatalities because our pilots are extremely well trained, and the first thing they do is put on their masks and descend their aircraft. And that training has been excellent, provided by the FAA and the Air Force and Navy chambers around our country. The problem we're going to run into is the slow decompression. So let's look at the pain steward. Let's just do some really simple math. And I'll wait for my little pointer here to magically show up. And he'll pop up in a minute. Wheels off the ground at 9:19. A normal communication at 9:27. So we're 8 minutes in. This is sign language for 8, by the way. And 6 minutes on top of the 8. At the 14th minute from time of takeoff, there's no further contact. Within 14 minutes, these pilots became incapacitated. My message to you is hypoxia is a phenomena of takeoff. And as part of your takeoff check procedures, you need to verify critically that your cabin altitudes are properly managed. Okay? Let's look at another one. As you know, this flew for 4 hours. This was the Payne Stewart event. And this was in 1999. Same year I opened up my facility, by the way. Only a year later, this Australian King Air took off, a solo pilot with 7 gold miners out of Perth, and he failed to pressurize on ascent as well. Within 20 minutes, his speech was drunken-like. And air traffic control immediately identified he was hypoxic and started yelling at him to put his mask on. You can read the transcripts if you read the Australian accident report. It's an excellent report. And he couldn't respond. And unfortunately, this flew for 4 hours and crashed as well, killing all on board. And then there was, this is, in my view, the seminal event that really should change how we look at hypoxia. Hypoxia has been extremely well taught for the last 50 years. But I think this is the event here in the United States that we should carry forward and look at slow cabin depressurization as an advanced concept and add it to our training. Once again, let's do some real simple math. 6:07 wheels are off the ground. 5 minutes in, there's an alarm. It's misinterpreted for something else. And for the next 8 minutes, the captain is in a vigorous conversation with air traffic control and the mechanic. And at the 13th minute, there is no further communication. Game over, lights out. Actually, the lights are on, it's just nobody's home. They became incapacitated. They took all 115 passengers and 6 crew total, crashing outside of Greece, and for a total fatality of 121. This is what changed my approach to hypoxia training. How is it that really good pilots could have missed that? I'm not sitting here doing the blame game. How is it that independent, different pilots in different situations can miss the same profile? They're good pilots, they're well trained. How did they miss it? Some of them had already been to high altitude chamber training, but they missed it on that day. Why did they miss it? And I'm here to tell you, the slower it comes on, the harder it is to identify. This is our most dangerous scenario in aviation today, in cabin pressurization management systems today. Well, in 2012, it's unfortunate that I'm sorry to report, we've had 2 more accidents, most likely related to hypoxia. This is a Cessna that flew off, took off out of Louisiana, crashed into the Gulf. You can read the report, the NTSB report. It's not definitive because there's such a lack of evidence, but it's strongly suggestive of cabin depressurization. And because they could see the pilot leaning forward, slumped, and the windows were iced. Well, this turned out to be a surgeon. So I ask you, how is it possible that a surgeon would miss his own hypoxia? You know, he puts people to sleep every day, right, for surgery. He missed his own hypoxia. What I'm saying is good people can miss this. This is a dangerous scenario. And then the last one, which was also in 2012, was a TBM outside of Ontario, Canada. And once again, it's non-definitive, but strongly suggestive because of the lack of evidence in this crash, because this airplane crashed at almost 300 miles an hour. Minimal evidence. But it's strongly suggestive of some type of pilot incapacitation. But here, let's do a little math again. Wheels are off the ground at exactly 12 noon. It's climbing through 14,000 feet at the 8th minute. He has a normal communication at the 12th minute, and then that's it. The plane spirals out of control at high speed, straight for the ground, and this is only 16 minutes from takeoff. But look at this, isn't this interesting? At 8,000 feet in the descent, the aircraft leveled off for 6 seconds in a violent spiral descent. How on earth could it have done that? I think our pilot woke up. You could fly to altitude, you pass out. Now he's unconscious, plane spiraling, this is just my theory. Plane is spiraling. As he's coming to the lower altitudes, he wakes up. But the aircraft is so violent in the upset, he can't recover. And he's still groggy because he had passed out. But I think he made some type of desperate attempt to level out the aircraft, but it was too late. These are the 5 accidents that I want to share with you. 137 fatalities, all of them a phenomena not only of slow onset hypoxia, which I define as 10 minutes, but what else? Takeoff. You've got to keep an eye on your pressures on takeoff, and or you've got to manage your pressurization system properly on takeoff. So let's check out another video now. So how can pilots miss it? This gentleman will tell you exactly how he can miss it. This is a corporate jet pilot who also is helicopter rated Sikorsky. So I had him fly my helicopter sim, you know, just for fun. And I took him to the higher altitudes. Let's watch him.
Mike, left turn 180, descend down 9,000 level.
Okay, left turn to 180 and going to 9,000 feet for 1 Mike.
And 101 Mike, continue that left turn into 170.
Continue left to 170.
And 101 Mike, verify altitude.
At 9,500, go to 9,000.
And 101 Mike, traffic at your 5 o'clock. Immediate right turn, 360.
Okay, right turn to 360, and I'm level 9,000.
Roger, climb maintain 9,500. Right turn 360.
Okay, going to 9,500. And
Actually, that's climb to 9,500, look like you're descending.
yeah, I'm fixing it.
And you feeling symptoms at this point?
A little short of breath.
Short of breath?
Yeah. Don't know why that would be funny, so maybe giddiness.
And Roger, climb maintain 10,000.
Okay, going to 10,000, and repeat the heading for me, please, if you would.
Yeah, 360 heading.
Okay, we'll get there.
And verify heading if you could for me, 101 from Mike. 210. Roger, keep that right turn in, and continue climb up to 10,000. You're right during descent.
Damn.
Are you feeling any other symptoms?
No, just noticing sloppy flying.
Noticing you're sloppy flying? We forgive you. And 101 Mike, disable left turn 270 before you hit the ground.
260 on the heading?
Yep, man, climb maintain any altitude before you hit the ground again.
So he crashes twice. Is he not talking normal? He's responding, but you reach this critical point where you're no longer in control of your aircraft. You could be awake and you're trying to talk, or you may be so fixated you don't want to talk to anybody anymore, or you could think it's a party and you're ready to go for a second drink. So hypoxia is different, and it's not everyone gets the same kind of experience and sensations. So as a result, I started thinking, golly, we always train in the daylight, don't we? Altitude chambers around the country, it's always in daytime environment, and we learn our hypoxia in the daylight. What about in a night flight? So I started writing a whole series of protocols, and we're actually doing hypoxia training in simulated night flights. And there, the physiology is still the same, but what it is your visual world is a little bit different because it's in the low light environment, and your instrumentations are pretty much demanding your central view. So that's going to be an interesting twist. And so I'm currently working on that. As a matter of fact, you can actually see the pilots right here. I have 3 pilots sitting in the chamber with their flight sims on a night flight. And as you know what they say, it's always more fun at night. What's the classic signs and symptoms that all of you have had to memorize? And we can go over this in about 1 minute. The most common is dizziness. We get a lot of people saying, you know, I feel a little lightheaded. Okay, so there's one. What else can you get? You can get numbness and tingling with your hands and feet. Yeah, my hands are kind of tingly, I feel it. You can also get this warm flushing over the face and chest. Very, very common. Warm flushing, wow, yeah, I feel really hot right on my chest and my face. I'm feeling a little dizzy and my hands are tingling. What else can you get? You can get changes in your vision. Now in the bright light, you're not going to notice your color loss as much as you would on a night flight. However, you could get tunnel vision, or it kind of gets blurry, or it's starting to tunnel down. So the classic kind of physical experience of hypoxia is a little bit of dizziness, numbness, tingling, a little warm flushing, feel your heart pounding, and you can feel your feet starting to tingle, and your vision is kind of different, it's starting to tunnel in. That's kind of classic hypoxia, but each person gets a different set of symptoms at different intensities. Just this Saturday, even before a gentleman called out his first hypoxia, his fingernails turned intensely blue, and the very first thing he said was, wow, look how blue my fingers are, because he was looking at his hands on his yoke and his throttle, and he's like, he even looked over at me. I was in the chamber with him. He goes, look at that, look at that. So cyanosis, but most of the time cyanosis is more of a later effect, and by the time you're cyanotic, you really need to go in your mask. You are intensely hypoxic. So it's just not enough to go ahead and learn the classic signs and symptoms. Here's what I can tell you. If you have 2 or 3 sensations of hypoxia, you are already neurocognitively impaired. You just don't know it. And the only way we can prove it is if I touched you. If I make you do complex tasks, real sharp banking right turn, proceed up to flight level 220, report passing 190, maintain 360, and you can't repeat that. You call back and you say, could you repeat that? Your concentration's already affected. Your skills may be preserved. If you're really experienced and you're set and you have 20 years experience of flying, you've got beautiful memory in there. You'll fly that aircraft perfectly right up to the point where you'll pass out. So everyone's a little different, and I customize different flight profiles to match different scenarios of hypoxia. And so here, this is a military program for South America, and I do high altitude Andean hypoxia training, flying their helicopters. Here are some general aviators, and I had them actually, I was testing out their bag masks. What I'm really happy about, and I just started doing in the past month, I can actually now track your simulated flight on your sim onto a networked ATC radar. And so, yeah, there you are, and we told you to turn right, and instead you turned left. Pilots, I'm trying to provide for video training experience more ways of trying to understand how hypoxia can affect their ability to fly the aircraft. If there's a paper that I would make you read, if this was a classroom and we were going to have homework tonight, I would make you read this one. It's by Nestis. It's an FAA paper, and it was published in '97. And what it basically does, and you should go out and just search it, it's easy to find. What it shows is if you take pilots and fly them at a certain altitude, let's say at 12,500 feet for an hour, versus a control group, in all phases of flight, they studied and found that even at 12,500, pilots made more mistakes. They weren't fatal, it didn't result in an impact of the aircraft, but they made more mistakes. That's at 12,500 for an hour. So if you read one paper that's relevant to general aviation, higher altitude, unpressurized aircraft, read that one, please. So I'm interested in what's known as task-oriented hypoxia. If you're just seated there, you're going to get it. If you're at cruise altitude of 33,000 and there's a very slow, sneaky hypoxia trying to sneak up on you, I think you're going to get it. I think good pilots will catch it. Ears are popping, things are happening, hey, what's going on? But if you're task-oriented, and I mean busy, and let's say you have a secondary issue, maybe there's an engine, ACAS alert, or there's something going on, then you will miss the hypoxia. And that is the setup. We need to be able to expand our training so that pilots can identify and maintain their situational awareness in the face of multiple issues going on. Cabin depressurization. I went ahead, and as you know, the Nestis paper was at 12,500, so I said, wouldn't it be interesting if I took some pilots in the chamber and recorded their sats at 12,500 for just 30 minutes? And here you go again. The oxygen drops pretty significantly low. As a matter of fact, the lowest sat was at 71%. That is very abnormal. That's very low. And people are different. I'm seeing that certain people have different SATs at different altitudes. And some people are very vulnerable, where others tend to be a little more resistant. And we're almost done. My time's limited today. If there was one video that I could show you of the importance of cabin pressurization management, oxygen delivery systems, and or any issues related to hypoxia, anything above 5 to 15,000 feet, it would be this video.
Altitude 17,900, heading at 160 and 300 knots. DCA 101, can I get a right turn to heading 340? 340, right hand turn, DCA 101. Roger 101. DCA 102, what's your current heading? We're heading 220, still maximum rep bank. Roger, DCA 102 and 103, what's your current heading, sir? Current heading at 270. Roger, DCA 103, can I get a right turn heading 360, upon reaching 360, climb and maintain flight level 230. Okay, 360 and climb to, can you repeat that, please? Roger, DCA 103, I need a right turn heading 360, climb and maintain flight level 230. Okay, climb and maintain 360, concern, DCA 103, faster? No, dizzy. Roger, DCA 103, and that was climb and maintain flight level 230 for DCA 103. Okay, 103, DCA 103. DCA 101, Tommy Ocean Master. Yes, sir, DCA 101, Tommy Ocean Master. Alright. DCA 102, how do you feel, sir? We are starting up the perimeter for DCA 102. Roger, DCA 102. And DCA 102, do you remember what heading you're turning to? Negative, DCA 103. Roger, DCA 102, that's heading 150. We'll still G-Max a bit for DCA 102. Roger. DCA 102, if you saw your co-pilot put on his oxygen mask, what would you do, sir? I was on the oxygen mask there for DCA 102. See, they put the oxygen.
Did you notice at what moment he became hypoxic? Is when he leaned forward and he gave up his aircraft. His aircraft goes out of control, he starts looking around. He crossed over that line, right? So he's sitting there looking around. We tell him, put your mask on. He gets all confused, gets confused with his headset. He even tries to don empty-handed, right? Then what did he needed help. He gets it and he's just he's starting to do that. And so you put the mask on him. How long did it take him to recover that aircraft? And so I'm here to tell you today, 30 seconds. Your brain will recover beautifully no matter how low the oxygen is, if you would just please put that mask on and take a couple of breaths. As a matter of fact, if you count his breaths, he's already recovering by the second breath, third breath, because the brain's just about ready to go out, but now it's resurging and getting back to normal function. So what's the expectation? If someone were to become hypoxic in the cabin and you tell them, put your mask on, and they put the mask on, right? How long should you wait? What is your expectation for his or her recovery? It's not 5 minutes, it's 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and publish that. Your expectation is, within 30 seconds, those eyes should be bright and chipper. If they're not, and they're sitting there telling you they're okay, they're not okay. There could be a mask leak, right? It could be a poor oxygen delivery supply. So the most important thing I can tell you today is that slow onset hypoxia is exceedingly dangerous, insidious, and the best of us can miss it. The expected recovery time in any of those scenarios is very quick and rapid. So I've been testing out different flight. I work with Embraer, and I've been testing out different mask systems. And I can tell you that you just saw our pilot have all kinds of trouble with that mask. Here I am donning in an Embraer 190.
Yeah, we're filming. There's the rapid decompression. Archimedes is going to don the oxygen mask. And
I can tell you, it requires more knowledge and intelligence to be able to don that mask. You pull the mask out, you have to press both buttons. In some masks, you press left, you press right. Press one way to inflate, press the other to deflate, or you can pull it out, press both simultaneously, it auto-inflates, drop it over your head, let go, comes down and seals on your face. What I can tell you, and the very first thing that I'm going to try, my next step in the development of my program, is to stop using my Scott 359s because I think they're too easy. I mean, it's nice. I mean, we want to make it easy. But in the real world, I think what I need to do is start using the quick don masks because they're a little trickier. So these are my take-home points for you. That the most dangerous of all hypoxia scenarios is the solo pilot on climb out in a slow onset cabin depressurization. That's, in my view, the most dangerous hypoxia scenario we have in the industry today across all boards of commercial aircraft, or all aircraft, doesn't matter. That failure of pressurization on ascent, on the climb out, while task-oriented, is the setup because you're so busy worrying about other things you don't notice how insidious it can be. The other scenario is the unpressurized general aviator aircraft at 10 to 15,000 and pilots who are not, as shall we say, been briefed as we are today about hypoxia. I'll confess, I was at a meeting. I had a pilot come up to me after a talk and said, you know, that high altitude chamber training didn't do me any good. I said, really? I go, what happened? Well, I was flying over the Sierras and I got hypoxic and I almost dropped my aircraft. I said, really? What happened to your oxygen systems? Well, I didn't have it. Well, why didn't you have it? And I was just standing there, and for 2 minutes, you know, that uneasy feeling of silence. I wasn't even understanding this. It finally dawned on me. He thought the altitude chamber protected him from all future events of hypoxia. Okay, I'm going to say that's very rare, and that's not reflective of the industry, but It happened. And I just have to tell you that. People have different perceptions of what hypoxia is. There's also this macho thing. Oh yeah, I go 12, 14 all the time. I've flown for hours, it's no big deal. Well, it is. It's just not affecting you. Some people tolerate it better than others. Other people are very sensitive. So the most important thing I can tell you today is that hypoxia is a phenomenon of takeoff, the most dangerous of all scenarios. That slow onset hypoxia is very insidious, and that we need to be uniquely aware of our oxygen status while flying. So that's it. I'd be happy to answer some questions. I've exceeded my time. I'd be happy to answer some questions. Yes, sir.
The question I had was, in that Nestus study, because we fly unpressurized at 10 to 12,000 feet coming down here for 5 hours, if you're not on oxygen for the entire period of that, is there a continued degradation of your oxygen saturation, or would it level out based on the altitude you were at?
No. Your saturation will reach an equilibrium. It will not continue to desat. What can happen is at that lower sat, you can become more tired, more lethargic, more sleepy. You may notice mild symptoms, but they kind of wear off. So you're operating at lower fuel for the brain, but the brain's working great for you. But you can't say that this is what I do wouldn't affect somebody else, right? Yes.
Hi. We have a canister that goes into the nose rather than a mask. Is that any less or more effective? We don't fly very high generally.
Your canister, your cannula is more than sufficient and excellent all the way up to 18,000 feet. I have tested that in the chamber. I go all the way up to 18,000 feet, and I'm sitting there on my little 2-liter nasal cannula, and it's a plastic tube, it's a plastic hose. Here's what I would suggest. Be very, very careful. It's just a plastic tube. So I had my SATs on, and all I did was just crimp the hose a little. I didn't cut it off. All I did was just bend it. I probably reduced the lumen size maybe about 50%, and my SATs started to drop. So always make sure it's into the nose, that it's properly fitted, and always make sure your tank is full. There was an accident. They had their oxygen tank inadvertently filled with compressed air, and there was a fatality. And you can read about that one. That's an NTSB report. It was aerial photography, and they were flying altitudes of 20,000, up and down, up and down. And before the last leg, they were low on oxygen, so they had the bottle filled, and it was filled, unfortunately, with compressed air. On the ascent, the captain wisely told the photographer, time to put your mask on. They did, and then he just passed out. The photographer said he started talking strange. He wasn't, feeling. He was kind of acting funny. He said he was dizzy, and then he passed out. That false sense of security, just because I filled up my tank, I put my mask on, the human factors of that is, well, then there can be nothing wrong with it. He should have been able to identify that there was something. For someone who flies that profile all the time, he should have been able to identify, hey, there's something not right about this, but he missed it. So be careful there, even with experience. In general, if you start to notice that warm flushing over your face and your chest, if you get a little tingly, if you're just a little lightheaded, you might want to double check your oxygen supply.
What was your question? Someone with the mic, please.
Am I on? Okay. In a scenario like that, at what point would the pilot's fingernails have started turning blue? Would that have been a real good diagnostic tool?
Yes. I do not like to wait to turn blue. But then again, I'm a doctor, right? But I can tell you that for the great majority of the flights, 3 good sensations and neurocognitive impairment is noticed in the flight control even before cyanosis. The person who will turn cyanosis, 1 in 10 people will go real pale. They look like they saw a ghost. Those people are going cyanotic. But they can be performing just as beautifully as anyone else. So it's not a telltale absolute 100% certainty that you're going to see that in every case. Does that help?
Dr. Bouza, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty.
If you'd all